Swoosh, 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 swoosh. We have Pat Fitzmaurice here with me today. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, Pat.
Great to be back, Matt. We had a little hiatus last year. We didn't connect.
What?
Part of that was because we always used to do a little quid pro quo with our respective podcasts, but then I gave mine up, or at least put it into hibernation.
Okay.
And so maybe that was it. Like I can't remember like which of us usually got the ball rolling first on that, but we'd kind of schedule my appearance on your show, your appearance on my show at the same time, and it just didn't happen last year. So it's been 2 years. Got a lot of catching up to do.
Fitz on Fantasy.
Correct.
Yes, I used to go on Fitz on Fantasy. Chi-Town in the house. That's right.
That's right.
So we've got the get in the chat, everybody. We're having a good time. We're gonna talk to Pat about a lot of things. So you're at Fantasy Pros now. What's it like to be over at Fantasy Pros? Your guys are going to be at the Expo, right? This summer?
We will be at the Expo, and I'm very excited to hear that you're going to make your Expo debut and Canton, Ohio. What an underrated town. In fact, I'm wearing a T-shirt from my favorite dive bar in Canton, Ohio, George's Lounge. Great burgers, cheap beer, Pabst Blue Ribbon, like $2. It's a great place.
Sounds great.
Can't wait to show it to you. Yeah, man. So Fantasy Pros is great. Just really good group of people. I left kind of a crappy company to go to Fantasy Pros like 3 years ago, so it's worked out swimmingly.
Yeah, it's Derek Brown, Thor. You guys are killing it, and I'm excited to see you guys at the Expo. I've never been to the Fantasy Football Expo. It's kind of a big deal. It's been growing like crazy. Year in, year out. You look up and it's like, wow, like they've tripled the attendance. Like it was an event that the industry didn't know it needed until it launched, and now it was like, yeah, we got to do this. It's interesting where during the lockdown period, people were like, what kind of events would as soon as we get out of this, we can hang out again. What would you like to do? And so I think there's a lot of them that went on. What kind of event should we create, host? And then was a lot of people inspired once all the lockdowns ended. Let's get out here. Let's plan some events. So I think there's a lot of cool events got planned during that time, and now it's just snowballing. We're gonna have a booth. We're gonna do it right. It's gonna be myself and Theo, and then potentially some others. We're still getting it figured out, but at the very least, it's Theo and I. We're gonna be at the DoubleTree in Canton, Ohio.
Fantastic.
I've been there once before. I've been to Canton once. So I've been to the Football Hall of Fame. I've been to the Baseball Hall of Fame. I've not yet been to the Basketball Hall of Fame, though it's close to me, so it's a little embarrassing there. But we did a big trip in college to Cedar Point in Ohio, and then we went to Canton. So we made a whole weekend out of it. It was great. But I'm excited to go back. It's gonna be a fun event.
Yeah, man, cool little downtown area, and it is just great to see everyone. And echoing what you said about the way it sort of took off after COVID. Like before that, I think it was, this nice idea by Bob Lung, but I think it was pretty small and insular before COVID. And like now it's just completely taken off. It's kind of like coverage of the Combine, where in the early years of the Combine, it was like a couple dozen media members sitting in a hotel lobby, like waiting to talk to whatever players the organizers and agents deigned to bring out to talk to the media. And, the practices or the workouts were all closed off. Now it's a big thing. Everyone can watch the workouts. It's a big media event. Similar kind of trajectory for the Expo.
And with fantasy football, remember, there was a theory, right? A theory that's been proven wrong, that sports betting was going to crowd out fantasy, right? Why would you play fantasy football when there's going to be sports betting? And then you look up, and actually I looked at the data from the FSGA, and the number of new fantasy gamers has gone up by a faster rate in the last few years than it had the few years prior to that. So not only has that whole idea been debunked, the opposite has been happening. And anecdotally, when you talk to people, they'll tell you, yeah, my son, my daughter, a whole bunch of people I know are now big into fantasy, and they weren't before. And it's like, yeah, this is fantasy isn't going anywhere. It's it's a good thing, because there were I wasn't worried about it, because I knew when you're in it and you see how passionate people are, there's no doubt. But now the data has come in, and it's like, oh yeah, fantasy is only gaining in popularity as we go. And it's weird too, because I've been playing for 25 years, fantasy football, right? And fantasy sports. And fantasy sports has been online. Like, you could do a live draft on ESPN 25 years ago. So that was really what popularized it, was the ability to do online drafts. And now people are realizing, yeah, I just want to draft teams on my phone, right? Whether it be Underdog or other platforms, like, that's what people want to do. I love just drafting on my phone, whether it be for sleeper with, mock draft, or a startup, a rookie draft. People love it. The format is, I think, forever. Fantasy as a and then the question is, when are other countries gonna pick up fantasy and it be popularized in Germany with soccer, or wherever around the world? I just feel like it's a very American thing, that the per capita fantasy gamer stats are super high in America compared to the rest of the world. But I think, I was talking to people at the last FSGA conference from India, talking about fantasy cricket, and that's growing very quickly in India. So yeah, man. Yeah, times are good.
Yeah, fantasy football's got its pockets of support, certainly in Europe, in England, and in Mexico. And Mauricio Gutierrez, who maybe you've heard of or met before.
He has a show on our YouTube channel.
Oh, he does. That's right. I forgot about that. So Mauricio sure. Well. And, Mauricio, I know we have talked about this, how popular the NFL is in Mexico, hugely popular, but he feels like they're just scratching the surface with fantasy football in Mexico.
Right.
And he's on the cutting edge of that. And that's it. You said it so well, Matt. Internationally, fantasy is about to take off too. That is the next great frontier.
That's right.
So, it's really exciting. I mean, I came over to FantasyPros. I've been in the newspaper business, or sort of newspaper adjacent business, for a while. And seeing fantasy grow simultaneously while the newspaper industry circled the drain was if you would have told me 25 years ago that I would eventually leave the newspaper industry for a job in fantasy football, I would think that I would have been moving into my mom's basement and, practically destitute. But no, it's a much healthier business, and no one reads newspapers anymore. But your aunt is in 5 fantasy leagues and a complete degenerate. So
we're in the right first business. Fantasy leagues that were available to the public were in the newspaper. They were in the sporting news.
That's right.
Right. Where they had the
tiers based.
Cap. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Salary cap game. That's where you mailed it in. You licked an envelope, you mailed it in. It was great. It was great. So, I think we should, I think it's time to kind of maybe do a proper introduction for what is your title now at, would you say at Fantasy Pro? Senior analyst?
No, it's
expert,
managing editor or something, but it's just analyst and editor. Oh, there it is.
Analyst and editor, senior analyst and editor. I'm gonna go senior.
Sure.
Because you're very experienced in the space. And I don't know. Before last year, when we had this the leap year, the skip year, how many shows did we do before that?
4.
Yeah. I think at least. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, a long-time guest. This will be at least show 5 for a senior analyst and editor from FantasyPros, one of our great friends in the industry and a smart guy across NFL draft, Dynasty, season long best ball. The guy knows it all. Here with me today, it is Pat Fitzmaurice. Talk to me.
Matt, how can I not get pumped up with Eye in the Sky going? But if you ever, like, I know a lot of your guests have talked to you about that song and how excited they get hearing it and how it gets them pumped up for the show with you. But, like, have you ever talked to any of your guests about the second part of the song and the interesting segue? It goes from being this stadium anthem, the song that Michael Jordan used to come out to and
Right.
like practically blow the roof off the United Center in Chicago. And then it turns into this song that's like, I don't know if it's even edgy enough to be yacht rock. It's like the musical equivalent of Cotton Candy. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was driving with my wife and that song came in the car and she's like, oh, the Bulls intro song, cool. And then all of a sudden
Wait, your wife
second
said,
half,
she called it out? She said Bulls intro song?
yeah, my wife kind of hates football and baseball, but she's really into the NBA and basketball.
She's cool, man.
That's her sport. So,
cool lady.
yeah, so she knows that song well. You know, we've been to both Bulls games. We live in the Chicago area. But then it turned into
North Carolina.
yes, Ray Clay, the legend. But then it turns into this like soft little yacht rock type song. My wife looked at me like I just passed gas. Like, what is this? This is the song? This is the rest of the song? And it's not like...
It's an interesting thing where if you happen to come across a hook, a great hook, right? If you think of it, right? If you're sitting there, you know, noodling around on the guitar, or you just wake up and you're like, oh, I got it, right? A musician almost has like an obligation. I've heard musicians talk about this where they know they've got a great hook and then the pressure is on to build everything around it. The bridge, the solo, the lyrics, everything, right? So you're like, this could be a hit. I know it could be a hit. It has the raw material to be a hit. Now I need to serve the song. I need to go into the lab and I need to serve this song. But it's interesting. There have been songs that just haven't been served well, right? There's been great hooks that, you know, ended up on songs that were duds. And that's always a bummer, man.
I just wonder if the Alan Parsons Project guys came up with that stadium intro part first or the mellow, chill part of the song first.
My guess is they didn't know what they had, and they just thought it was a nice little ditty, and they didn't think it was that special. There are so many artists that'll tell you that they can't pick the singles that'll come out on their album. And there's usually one guy, this one sort of whisperer, that can pick the singles, that can be like, no, it's actually this song is the one we should run, where the band is like, I remember the Smashing Pumpkins talking about this, where Billy Corgan was like, yeah, we were thinking the first single was going to be Jelly Belly. And then the record company, there was a guy at the record company that really knew what would hit, right? He was a tastemaker, and he was like, yeah, so we're not going with Jelly Belly. We're not doing that. We've got a better idea. You know, so I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, or like, you know, it was like Tonight or 1979 or something. Like, really? And then some of these guys, the bandmates are like, really? You guys are gonna go with that song as the single? And then the record company's like, just trust us, guys. All right, you're too close. That's the other thing. Sometimes when you're an artist, you get too close to the work, and it's very hard to distinguish between like what the public would run to versus just appreciate as part of an album. You need some distance. You need someone to come in from the side and be like, oh, that, but not that, that, but not that. And then you just have to trust them and go with it. And usually they're right. There's a few occasions where I know that, you know that song What's Up by Four Non Blondes?
Yeah.
You know that song? So there was one interesting case where the whole band knew what the single was going to be. And and she's a sort of a famous songwriter now from the Four Non Blondes. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. It's kind of it's bugging me. I'm gonna look it up in a minute. But anyway, she knew that song, What's Up, Linda Perry knew that the song What's Up was the hit. The whole band knew it, but the producer ruined it. Like, he ruined it by like changing the drum part and changing the tempo to a song that she didn't even like anymore. She was like, "Why is he adding, this like overwhelming snare part and all this stuff?" And she's like, the song was perfect the way it was. He came in and ruined it. And then so what ended up happening was she was asking all these questions of the record executives about what kind of power she had to flip the song back to the original. And eventually they're like, yeah, well, technically, according to the contract, you're the writer, you have the songwriting rights and the publishing rights to this song. We get, obviously a big cut of it, but you do own it. So what she ended up doing was she drove to the factory where they were pressing the record, and at the very last minute, she pulled the song out and she re-engineered the master and gave it back to the factory. And it's like, okay, press this one. And so it was like at the last minute, just as they're pressing the CDs and the vinyl, she was able to swap it out. And she was like in a panic because I think what happened was you've had this happen to you, right? Where someone who purports to be an expert will tell you the way they think it should be. Like, we've had this happen in fantasy all the time, right? And you're like, I'm going to draft this guy. This is my new strategy. Okay, I'm taking this guy in the first round. And then one morning, you just bolt up out of bed, right? And you're like, no, that's not right. Like, and you realize, like, sometimes you process it in your sleep that I just got bulldozed by someone who was just turning over their credentials on me, right? They just flipped over the credentials card, slammed it on the ground, slammed it on the table and said, no, I know what's best for this album. I know what's best for this song. I know what's best for your fantasy team. Do it this way. And you're like, I don't think that's right, but I guess. And then sometimes you process it in your sleep, what's in your best interest. And you're like, actually, no fucking way. I'm going to go to the mattresses to make this change. And it was like, you have 1 day left to get to the factory to change the song. And then she's like, I wouldn't be here right now if I hadn't driven to the factory that day. It's crazy.
We just have to hope that we are not the people causing people to sit bolt upright thinking, wait, why am I listening to Pat Fitzmaurice on this? He's an idiot.
Well, that's right. Yeah. So if you think that our advice is well reasoned and you're nodding along in the moment, it's probably right. But if you are listening to a fantasy expert of some kind or a fantasy pro like Pat Fitzmaurice, and you're thinking, man, I don't know, man, I just can't do it, right? It's like if someone last year talked you into Quentin Johnston, right? And you're like, but I watched TCU, and every TCU game I watched, he dropped passes and they weren't throwing the ball to him as much as I thought they would. And I just have a bad feeling about this guy. Then you could just bolt upright and be like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going Zay Flowers. Fuck it, I'm going Zay Flowers. I'm not drafting Quentin Johnston. And that would have been the right decision.
Indeed.
What if the Chargers had drafted Zay Flowers? Right, they'd be in a much better shape, right? Zay Flowers was or Jordan Addison, the local kid, the kid from down the street that they should have had, 10 different scouting reports on. Those were more direct replacements for Keenan Allen, who they were moving on from anyway the following year. If you are planning your roster moves in advance and you're not just, flippantly letting guys go and signing guys, then you should have known, hey, we have 1 year left with Keenan Allen before we're going to have to move on. And the organizational plan is to backfill him with, the perfect players to replace a Keenan Allen were in the draft and available in the second half of the first round last year in Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. That's why it was so confounding to me that they would go Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, those guys were always safer, but maybe they saw QJ as being the one-for-one Mike Williams replacement. I don't know. Do you think there's any chance Quentin Johnston recovers from that rookie season? And
no.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
No, he's not. He's just not good. It's just like there wasn't a chance for N'Keal Harry. They're very similar guys where, hey, in college, they can catch a bubble screen, break a tackle, and make things happen. And that's just not today's NFL. You can certainly catch a bubble screen and make things happen in the NFL, but this idea that you have to be schemed into space is a death sentence, right? If the coaches believe that you need to be schemed into space or schemed touches, then you're Tavon Austin. Like, it's just not a long-term viable wide receiver in the league. You need to be able to go out, create separation, squeeze the football in traffic, and earn these targets. And Quentin Johnston is just not a target earner. He wasn't a target earner at TCU. The whole case for him was, his yards after the catch. But in the NFL, there's a big disparity between when the ball is in the quarterback's hands and when the ball actually ends up in the wide receiver's hands and he can make a move after the catch. There's a gulf there of athleticism, instincts, and attention to detail that has to occur before you can make a move with the ball in your hand. That was the whole piece that the Chargers completely forgot about.
Does this mean you're out on Malachi Corley?
I'm out on Malachi Corley because he was a great yak receiver in college. Just because you're a great yak receiver doesn't mean you're Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston just happened to be incompetent in these other areas. It's still a positive attribute that a guy is a monster after the catch. I still like Malachi Corley for that reason. I don't believe that Malachi Corley is like a sloppy route runner or doesn't have what... I mean, it's more difficult because we didn't see him playing consistently against top-level competition like we did with Quentin Johnston. So he is a little bit more of a black box prospect. We just happen to know he is great after the catch, which is why he was a third-round pick. That's where Quentin Johnston should have been drafted. Right? If Quentin Johnston was going around Michael Wilson last year, that would have made sense to me because Michael Wilson also had a lot of uncertainties because he barely played in college. So that's where you take chances on guys that can develop or have uncertainties. The third round, is where you take these super high upside yet raw wide receivers. Think about Terry McLaurin. Right? Terry McLaurin never had a 1,000-yard season in college. Right? He was outproduced by Paris Campbell because Paris Campbell was getting scheme touches. He was taking handoffs, he was getting all these screen passes, and he was soaking up the targets. And in this wide-open Ohio State offense, if you're getting all those touches, you can roll up 1,000 yards. Whereas McLaurin was on the outside, and the incentive to throw to him against some of these weaker defenses just wasn't there, and he never produced. But he had the great speed, and the scouts identified him as a great all-purpose wide receiver, just didn't have the production to back it up. That's a third-round pick. That's the perfect third-round pick.
With you on that.
I mean, I just happen to pick Terry McLaurin, one of the great third-round picks ever, as an example. But it is a great example. It is a great example. Chase Claypool, right? Oh. Chase Claypool. There's another guy where I thought he was overdrafted in the second round, right? That's an upside developmental guy that could splash down, and he did as a rookie. Like as a rookie, you're like, oh my God, they stole him in the second round. And then time goes by, and you're like, well, I don't know. Martavius Bryant. That's another, I think. These are the guys I'm circling if I'm a GM in the third round.
Yeah, I mean, 6'4", 4.4 speed. Though we see like we don't even have the 6'4" guys in this year's draft, but we've got like the 6'2" guys with 4.4 or sub 4.4 speed who were super sexy to some teams. Adonai Mitchell didn't go in the first round as some people thought maybe he would, but still a second rounder, and like the production profile is kind of dicey on Adonai Mitchell.
That's the thing, man. That's the thing. That's why Adonai Mitchell in the first round never made any sense to me. But you're like, there's been a lot of first round picks that didn't make any sense to me. Henry Ruggs never made any sense to me. Corey Coleman never made any sense to me. There was a lot of guys that didn't make any sense to me. Baylor receiver in the first round. Get out of here.
John Ross, Philip Dorsett. I mean, teams just fall in love with speed.
Philip Dorsett, I almost think that John Ross was a little more defensible than Philip Dorsett. But, I mean, there was a ton, right? A ton of these guys end up going first round for whatever reason. There's some sex appeal that some scout is just selling like crazy. Whereas a guy like Brandon Cooks, he had the same speed as Philip Dorsett, but he was a mega producer in college. And he was active on special teams. So he had more of like a true football skills as well. Whereas Philip Dorsett wasn't a big special teamer at Miami. He looked the part of a special teams guy, but he wasn't. Right? And it's like, okay, so what am I missing here? That's where, over the years, an appreciation of, hey, has this guy played a lot on special teams? I mean, it's really the Cooper Kupp corollary, where Cooper Kupp was like the most prolific special teamer at Eastern Washington that you could draw up. And so that was yet another, reason why. I think that Cooper Kupp, that's a guy that, even though he was a small school player, that's more of a high floor guy that you would take in the second round, as opposed to a guy where you're just taking a big swing. That I think of more as a third round, fourth round wide receiver. So when you look at the NFL draft this year, what was the most surprising thing about the draft, the thing that happened that you were shocked by?
Oh, man, I would love to give you a nonconformist answer, Matt, and tell you it was, 14 straight offensive players peeling off the board to start the draft, or that was a big one. 14 straight, crazy, like double the previous record. Or like the Cowboys not picking a running back when clearly they needed like at least one more body there. But I mean, like the spit take moment was clearly the Michael Penix pick. And like, I don't despise that pick as much as a lot of other people do. Like
people despise that pick.
Oh yeah. I mean,
other than Mike Lombardi, who's
I think reaction has been pretty negative to it, and just kind of the same reaction that a lot of Packers fans, including myself, had when they picked Jordan Love. And that was later in the round, and Jordan Love was a younger prospect. Not that I really care too much about the age of a quarterback prospect, unless the guy was like on a Mormon mission or something and is 28 coming out of college. But I don't know. I just think people believe the Falcons overinvested in the quarterback position, if there is such a thing. But other people like Kirk Cousins more than I do. I think he's pretty average, at least from a real world perspective and not a fantasy perspective. And I understand that they've got this quarterback in the mid-30s coming off an Achilles tear. I get the incentive to back that up in a big way.
With the most valuable position in sports. Exactly.
And like you see people raise that question on Twitter all the time. Like, what if a team took quarterbacks in the first and second round of the draft, or drafted two guys on day one or two guys in the first 2 days? And why not? Quarterback is so important.
If you got to get that position right.
Exactly.
What's the problem? Yeah, I never understood it. I think there are analysts out there with an agenda that just don't like the Falcons, don't like the people there for whatever reason, and they're looking for a reason to criticize them. So I thought that was really unfair. I think all the criticism you want to send over to Carolina is deserved. Clearly, they have no idea what they're doing, and they are going to be in perpetual rebuild mode until there is someone that has a plan that focuses on the right details and sticks with it, like a long-term strategy, who understands how to scout prospects. Someone needs to go to Carolina, establish that, and then they can start to rebuild. Otherwise, this is going to be just a perpetual 5-win team for the foreseeable future. They're not even comparable, the two drafts. Like the Michael Penix pick, you might think it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't. It was interesting conversation. I think the pick, because it was a quarterback and a quarterback with dynamism, that alone, no matter who they had on the roster, that means that pick has some upside, but also has a nice floor in the value of that asset. So I have no problem with it, as opposed to a team's entire draft being laughable. It's just that the Carolina draft, I think, was so bad in contrast to so many teams getting it right for the first time. My biggest surprise was how many teams got it right. And with all those skill position players drafted, all those offensive players drafted in the first half of the draft, that was the first indicator right there. Oh, the NFL is finally starting to figure out positional value. They're finally figured. Like, we'll look back at this draft as the year that NFL GMs finally figured out positional value. So that to me was a huge event. And when you look back and you see how things stacked up, where running backs were drafted, the fact that the Cowboys didn't even select a running back, where middle linebackers got drafted, even from just a year ago, this was a much more efficient pick and much more efficient set of picks for entire teams.
Yeah, the run on offensive tackles, too, and you didn't see many interior linemen going until day 2, day 3. We saw that with that for sure. Matt, did we ever hear the Panthers say whether they traded into the first round to get Xavier Legette because they wanted the extra year, or because they were worried that they were going to get jumped by another team?
Who cares? Both of them are just completely dubious rationales. And
Yes.
The funniest part of it is the Panthers are now admitting that they weren't sold on his route running. And Xavier Legette even comes out and confirms it. Yeah, they expressed some concerns about my route running during the process. And I'm like, this is a first rounder, man. Like, this is what I'm talking about. When I talk about positional value, I'm talking about, well, you want to draft a position that really matters, that really affects the outcome of games, and in the first round in particular, and also that have lower bust risks, like a left tackle with certain dimensions and athleticism. That's what I'm talking about. Those are the safest picks out there. The risk reward on a Xavier Legette is just wrong for that particular draft slot. What?
Especially with the depth in the wide receiver class this year. I mean, wouldn't the Panthers have been better off addressing another position and maybe getting Jermaine Burton later on?
Well, yeah, Malachi Corley would have been the pick, right? So if you want to take a guy who's obscure, right, maybe from a small school, and you're not sold on his route running, but you want to have a guy that has like that it factor of some kind, right? He's developmental, but he has that it factor. Well, that's Malachi Corley, right? That's the guy that led, college football in yards after the catch. That's the guy you want, and that guy was available at your pick at the start of the third round. That's where you draft a guy. This is exactly what I'm talking about, what we talked about before. Where should you take a Martavius Bryant? Right there, beginning of the third round. Green light, go ahead. That's what you should be doing. And it's funny, like right now, we're seeing news about Martavius Bryant. We're seeing news breaking about Chase Claypool. Martavius Bryant has been released by Dallas. Shockingly. And the reason I'm shocked is I didn't know he was still in the league.
Yeah, I guess the mini camp didn't go well.
Was he? So he's a Dallas Cowboy. I did not know that. He was a Dallas Cowboy. He's now a no boy. Right? He's nowhere.
Yeah, take him off your comeback player of the year list.
Yes.
So the guy hadn't played since 2018. Would have been quite a comeback for, I think, 2018. Yeah,
I think that's impressive that he was on a roster at all in the month of March and April, having not played in so many years. I mean, that just goes to show the benefit of the doubt that the league will give you if you have size and speed. If you're Greg Dortch and you stop being able to squeeze the football with the consistency that you have been in the last few years, you're instantly cut. No one will pick you up. You're gone. Right? Because you're 5'9" and you run a 4.55. And if you're not producing and you're not delivering when you're in the game, you're not commanding any targets, or even if you experience some kind of dip in production, over, gone, forever. Martavius Bryant has 5 years to figure it out because he's big and strong and fast. It's funny.
Yeah, that's it. It is
funny. Chase Claypool. I think don't we have breaking news with Chase Claypool? Chase Claypool has signed with the Bills. How about that?
All tools, no toolbox. I mean, he is the ultimate size speed project and excited us with 9 touchdowns his rookie year, and just haven't seen enough. And I think it was that Thursday night game against the Vikings, Steelers-Vikings, where I believe the Steelers were down 8 and driving in the last minute to try to tie it up. They complete a pass to Chase Claypool with like under a minute left, clock running, and Chase has to like stop to make the first down signal. And like one of his offensive linemen runs over to him like, dude, come on, let's get back to the line of scrimmage. Tried to like yank the ball away from him, and Chase Claypool sort of like grabbed it back, reacted badly. Probably not a good indicator that he was long for the NFL at that moment, that there was something askew with him between the ears.
Yeah, I mean, the guy put up, 13-plus fantasy points per game as a rookie. He had over 800 yards. He had 9 touchdowns. He commanded over 1,400 air yards. But the next year, the air yards went from 1,450 to 1,200. The targets came down. Everything came down. The touchdowns came way down. And that's when you knew it was over, right? It's just that one season where you see a regression in year 2, over. Right, over, because he's given every chance. They were begging him to become an alpha, and he just didn't want to do that. He had the number 1 athleticism score in the class, right, when he was drafted in 2020, and just done. Just didn't want to be a football player. When you watch Hard Knocks, one of the takeaways is this is really hard. This is really hard, and even if you are a professional athlete, even if you are 6'4", 230, super strong, the level of toughness, the level of durability, the level of tenacity, grit that you need to be an NFL player. Like, oh, this guy's a grit player. He's gritty. This is a cliche. Well, actually, all of them are. All of them. The whole roster, right? And there's a few that aren't. And the only reason they're on the team is because they're size speed specimens and they're not going to be on the team in 2 years.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, we are sort of trained to look at these guys very clinically and what they can do for our fantasy teams, and just the level of personal motivation that these guys have to be successful is off the charts with what they go up against every day. And like you said, Hard Knocks is a really good example of it, and lets us get a peek behind the curtain at what it takes. And the guys who are able to do that, especially the guys who aren't 6'4" and run a 4.4 40, and who are able to overcome athletic limitations to carve out nice careers in the NFL, is wildly impressive.
So there's another player that has some similarities to Quentin Johnston, some similarities to Chase Claypool, some similarities to Malachi Corley, some similarities to a lot of players. Terrace Marshall is his best comparable on playerprofiler.com. Rashee Rice. So Rashee Rice, one incident where you make a bad decision, like Christian Kirk throwing bricks at cars in the parking lot of like a PGA event.
Yeah, the Phoenix Waste Management, the biggest drunk fest on the PGA Tour. And,
right, so he got hammered with his friends and had a dazed and confused moment where he threw a bowling ball through the back window of a car. Okay, it happens, right? You're young, you're with your friends, and you're goofing around, and you're trying to be a badass, and peer pressure takes over, and suddenly you're making a really bad decision. This can be forgiven. It can even be understood and moved on from. But when a second incident happens the very same offseason, the track record of those players is just stupid low. It's really low. It's a very, very low probability that guy is able to parlay whatever success he had as a rookie and then build on that. You basically are just it's like a Jenga tower, and you're pulling the bricks out of the bottom that would let you build up over, and you're just taking too many out of the bottom, and the whole thing's collapsing. That's how I think about a guy like Rashee Rice, where it's like, I'm not drafting that guy in Dynasty. Someone else can have him. Why would I?
And I think maybe we're going to look back on his rookie year maybe as being one of the most productive, if not the most productive seasons of his career, because I think it was largely a product of the circumstances and the Chiefs just having nothing else in that wide receiver room. MVS, Justin Watson, Sky Moore, a colossal bust. I feel like that really pumped up Rice's production. And like, he wasn't this short area catch and run guy in college. That wasn't his game. And I think they felt like this is the only thing that's going to work. We don't know if this guy can get open running routes and beating defenders that way. We're just going to scheme him the ball and let him do things after the catch.
Okay.
And now they have more than satisfied that need. So I just wonder if Rashee Rice is going to see anything close to the kind of numbers that he put up in his rookie year.
He was a prolific SMU receiver, right? A lot of these teams, especially in the Big 12 and the Conference USA, the Baylors, the TCUs, the SMUs, bad history, man. Bad history of translating to the NFL. Okay.
Josh Doxson.
I mean, the list goes on, Pat. The list goes on. Rashee Rice didn't even have 500 air yards last year. He had the exact same number of fantasy points per game as Chase Claypool as a rookie, 13.3. Same exact, right? The difference is that Claypool had over 1,400 air yards that year. Rashee Rice was a product of yak. So if you're worried about Malachi Corley at all, you should be even more worried about Rashee Rice.
Completely agree. And the arrival of all the extra talents at wide receiver, I don't think it bodes well for Rashee, even if he does dodge legal trouble and doesn't wind up with a 6-game suspension or on the commissioner's list.
What are the chances that he has another intersection incident with law enforcement?
Oh, man.
But what are the chances? If he has 2 this offseason, what's the likelihood that it happens during this season or the next offseason? Just start to think through, like, run the thought experiment. What's the probability? And his ADP in Dynasty is just, it still has not fully corrected. We have an ADP tab on Player Profiler, and you can see his sleeper Dynasty ADP. And it's gone down, right? From 52 down to 55 in the last week. But still, wide receiver 27, 5th round, no thank you.
Too high.
No, I'm not doing it.
Way
I'm
too
not
high.
doing it, man. I've seen too many things. They'll say, "Oh, you're jaded," right? No, I'm experienced. Like, I've seen some things, and I'm going to use this experience to make sure that at a, the fifth pick, your fifth pick in a dynasty startup is a big deal. I mean, that's a premium pick, and to use it on a guy with those kind of red flags, it's both advanced metrics red flags from what he did in 2023 and the off the field red flags of what he's been doing in 2024.
Yeah, the off the field stuff doesn't go away for most guys. Like, one of the few I can think of is Tyreek Hill, who had some off the field issues early in his career, and then things have quieted down in his personal life. But generally, that is not the way things go.
Yeah, well, he also ran a 4.2. Rashee Rice runs a 4.5. Right? Rashee Rice is an average athlete, an average, NFL wide receiver, starting NFL wide receiver. Okay? So, when you talk about risk versus reward, when a guy has special skill set, Chase Claypool was in a completely different situation in that he didn't have any off-the-field incidents, and he had the physical tools of a Calvin Johnson if he just wanted to be a professional athlete, which he didn't want to be. That was a much easier case to make, to jump in on and buy high on a Chase Claypool. This is like Rashee Rice did us all a favor by having these incidents happen. Now he's being scrutinized. Now they're drafting Xavier Worthy. Whereas the red flags were there on his production profile in 2023. It's just that he's a rookie that put up 13 fantasy points a game with Patrick Mahomes, and that was like the focus, instead of digging into the numbers and going, "Oh man, this is classic getting scheme touches without earning real targets down the field." So, I mean, I don't have any questions about, let's say, Marvin Harrison's ability to earn targets down the field. I'm very excited about Kyler Murray. His underdog ADP right now is 78. Right? So that's to me, that's a value. He's been going up like since the Harrison pick, which is interesting. It was a really good sort of arbitrage, knowing, I mean, it was the worst kept secret I've ever seen that the Cardinals were going to draft Marvin Harrison. So why now is like this the Kyler Murray's ADP experiencing a run up? Right, he's still QB8. Right, QB8 is like that. I want him at QB8, baby.
Yeah, that's like underdog ADP, right?
Yes.
In home leagues, I think he's maybe not held in quite that high regard, but he probably should be.
He should be.
Yeah, if you go back and look at his fantasy points per game since his rookie year in 2019, QB11, QB5, QB4. 2 years ago was QB7 if you take out the quarterbacks who only played a game or two, and QB9 last year. And that QB9 last year was with nothing at wide receiver, like zero. And so, yeah, I like it. Maybe there's some ambiguity about what that offense is going to look like with a new coordinator, Drew Petzing, who's this Kevin Stefanski disciple who maybe they skew a little run heavier than average, but like I'm not really worried about that with Kyler. And now he's got two really good pass catchers in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, and some candidates elsewhere,
like Michael Wilson.
Michael Wilson, Zay Jones, who they just brought in, Greg Dortch, who doesn't suck.
Right. What if Michael Wilson was on the Chiefs last year? Like, he would have had more air yards than Rashee Rice.
Probably.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, totally. So think about that. Yeah, I love the Cardinals this year. Love their offense. Love Kyler Murray. I mean, this is it. I mean, if Kyler Murray doesn't produce this year, if he's not super efficient this year in his age 27 season, I mean, this is it, man. He's finally fully recovered from the ACL tear. That's now in the rear view. He's got his super prime years staring right at him. They've given him all the weapons he would ever need. It's go time, baby.
Yeah, and it's not like he sucked. It's not like he's been Daniel Jones where, like, okay, show us something or you're out forever. I mean, I just think, like, now they've got the offensive line to a point where it's actually not a weakness. The Cardinals, who couldn't get the offensive line right for 20, 25 years, finally may have gotten it right. And now they're giving him weapons. So, yeah, I'm bullish.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like, his completion percentage only dipped under 65% as a rookie. And it was 64.4%. Right? And, yeah, the rushing dipped, but that's only because he played 8 games. Right? If he played a full season last year, he would have had 500-plus rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. The guy's always putting up, QB 7 or better numbers every year, except his rookie year. So if you're telling me, like, right now that you can get him at QB 8, well, that's his floor. So thank you. I'll take it. What about Caleb Williams? Caleb Williams has Rome Odunze, and the chemistry, in their, I guess they were throwing before minicamp, and the chemistry was amazing. Maybe just they were throwing in the street under a street light or something, outside the hotel, but I guess. Because Rome Odunze is now sitting out. So I guess they had a brief moment there, maybe one practice where they were showing great chemistry, and now he has the tight hamstring. So Rome Odunze, tight hamstring. You worried about that at all?
Not ideal that a rookie has a soft tissue problem in his first NFL minicamp, but I'm not panicking about it. Chemistry does seem good. I mean, maybe there's a lid on targets for Rome in his rookie year with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen both around, but Keenan Allen's probably only in Chicago for a year, and still have to like that pick if you're a Bears fan. Just get that pitch and catch combination with top 10 picks, and they should be prolific for a long time. So mostly rosy feelings about it, I think.
Yeah.
With me and in Chicago generally.
It's the least concerned I've ever been about a hamstring injury. Because sometimes hamstring injuries, they're due to a lack of hydration, stretching, and then it's an indication that this guy's just kind of, pulling a Devontae Parker, eating a bunch of Skittles, showing up for the bare minimum, right, and pulling a hamstring. Like, that's like, oh man, this guy again doesn't have that it factor to translate the athletic gifts into actual NFL production consistently. If you just looked at hamstring injuries back through time, you would see there's a correlation there between bust wide receivers and hamstring injuries. There are some wide receivers that they can operate that way, and their talent is so good, it's so beyond, like a Randy Moss, that it doesn't matter. Randy Moss was pulling hamstrings all the time. I don't think this is what happened with Odunze. I think this is just a hamstring injury that happens. I think this is more of a randomized hamstring injury because everything you're hearing about Odunze is that he's a psycho work ethic guy. So for that reason, that's the real reason. I'm not worried about like injury track record building up with him. I'm always worried about, rookies getting these soft tissue injuries and what that might mean for, their commitment to the sport. I'm not with Rome, so I'm not worried about it at all. Javonte Williams, I think the issue with him is not about passion or about work ethic. It's just that he had the unfortunate injury where he tore everything, and there are some knee injuries that you just can't come fully back from. I mean, we're so used to guys as soon as they're a year removed from the injury, right? They had the comeback year, and then the year following the comeback year, usually, hey, they're back to 100%. We take it for granted the way medical technology has evolved. But there's still catastrophic knee injuries that can make it so that you're just not the same guy again. And where are you with Javonte Williams?
I'm optimistic that he is back to the guy we saw early in his career now that he's more than a year removed from that injury, Matt. But at the same time, I'm a little concerned that he's never going to get the chance again to be just a pure workhorse guy. Like Sean Payton has always kind of done the multi-back thing. The good news is that Sean Payton has had offenses that have supported more than one fantasy relevant back. We had the Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush combination early in Payton's tenure in New Orleans. We had the Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram combo. So maybe we get that now with Javonte and some combination of Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah, Jaleel McLaughlin's not. This is breaking news. We should probably run the breaking news here. Jaleel McLaughlin not Alvin Kamara.
I think it's safe to say that, although there are some people who are pretty optimistic about him, including my colleague Derek Brown. I'm not quite as optimistic about him. I'm not. But,
little Tariq Cohen vibes there, unfortunately. And yeah, those guys don't hold up. You know, it's very rare. I mean, you have the one like Raheem Mostert who somehow built his body up over the course of 10 years where he could finally sustain significant touches in the NFL. It's a long road to get there. I hope McLaughlin gets there. I just don't see it. I don't think he's going to have even anything close to the workload that Kamara did. That's the hope with Javonte. The problem is Audric Estime, he has a lot of those Javonte Williams skills.
And he could be the goal line guy. Like that's Audric Estime's thing. Whereas he could maybe be the Mark Ingram in that offense if Sean Payton wanted to play it that way.
And that he could be the and then there's a touch squeeze and Javonte Williams is just squeezed out. I mean, I don't love the offense. It's going to be one of the worst offenses in the league. And so if you don't love the offense, you don't love the offensive line, and this is a guy that's going to, in Javonte Williams, going to need to grind out yards. He's going to need to score touchdowns. They add an Estime. There's another guy. I'm just looking for guys where I'm like, what is the risk reward? And the risk reward on Javonte Williams, you're still paying an ADP in all formats based on the fact this guy was a second-round pick and he was one of the better runners we've seen in college football the last 5 years at UNC. He's not that guy anymore. The situation is the stone worst. So just scratch him off the list. I mean, it would be totally over if they drafted a running back in day 2, but they didn't. So there's still some hopium around him that's buoying his ADP. I don't care. That's just an easy scratch off to me. What are you losing? Can he beat you? No. No one's going to be looking up at the end of the year and go, oh, yeah, I didn't have enough Javonte Williams. That's not a thing anyone's going to say. So just scratch him off, man.
Yeah, that's kind of it. There's really not top 10 upside there.
You know, a quarterback I am warming up to is Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew's in a pretty damn good situation, don't you think? Or do you think it's going to be Aiden O'Connell? Because apparently there's a competition. Do you think it's a real competition?
I should probably be advocating for Aiden O'Connell since he went to the high school that my kids are going to right now.
Oh yeah, good for him.
Where he didn't start until his senior year as a quarterback there, which is kind of interesting. And,
I like that actually.
He's been the plucky underdog. You know, he came up. I don't think he was super well regarded at Purdue and expected to become anything. But
you saying he's the next Brock Purdy?
I don't know about that, Matt. I don't know about that, but not quite as much college playing experience as Brock Purdy, who got all those starts at Iowa State. But I guess I'm a little bit worried about the Raiders' offense with Luke Getsy. Not my favorite play caller in the league.
Okay.
Anything else, though? I think Minshew can do enough to support Devontae Adams and still make Adams a very impactful fantasy player and do enough to make Brock Bowers a fantasy relevant rookie tight end. But I mean, Minshew sort of did that for Michael Pittman last year, but
Yeah.
Minshew averaged like 6.7 yards per attempt. Pittman scored 4 touchdowns. Pittman averaged under 11 yards per catch. I mean, Minshew can do just enough to keep the wheels on an offense, but I don't know about the upside there. What do you like about him, Matt?
Well, Pittman had 156 targets.
He did.
Right? And Davante Adams is better than Michael Pittman. You've got Jacoby Myers, one of the best skill position possession receivers. Now you have Brock Bowers. Right now you have Dylan Lobby, who's going to instantly be one of the better satellite backs in the league. To me, this is just a fun offense. And he didn't have nearly this kind of weaponry with Indianapolis. So maybe he plays, first 6 weeks? He's going to get blamed for struggles. They're going to turn to Aiden O'Connell eventually. This is all going to happen. The switch will happen between week 6 and week 12. But I like these. But then Aiden O'Connell might get hurt, and then they'll have to go back to Minshew. Like, that's just what happens. That's just how the NFL season plays out. And you look up, and Minshew has 12 games started. And, on a per-game basis, he's like the QB 12. And you're like, how the hell did this happen? And it's like, well, look at his weaponry and the fact that he is going to run. Right? Every year he runs. I mean, he only had 100 rushing yards last year, so it wasn't a lot, but he ran for 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, that and the Raiders defense is probably not going to be lights out this year, so maybe we're going to get a couple shootout game scripts for him. I could see him being a reasonably valued quarterback 2. Right now, considering the price is outside the top 25 quarterbacks, I get it. In super flex leagues, there's a late round best ball dart throw. I'll buy it.
But O'Connell too, though. That's the thing. I like them both. Like for Dynasty in a super flex Dynasty league, I like acquiring both Minshew and O'Connell because, again, the weapons will buoy you. They added Bowers, man, to a team that already had Davante Adams and Jacoby Myers and Michael Mayer. This is going to be an awesome 12 personnel team. They're going to be able to, run 11 personnel with Bowers in the slot. It's going to be awesome. I think they're going to be down like crazy. They're playing the Chiefs twice. Yeah, it's a great division to score points. I mean, I know that the Chargers are going to start to probably, milk the clock more, and the Broncos aren't necessarily the greatest offense, but there's going to be shootouts. They're gonna be down, and they're gonna be in comeback mode. I kind of love it. I kind of like the offense.
You might be talking me into this one, Matt. I even sort of like Trey Tucker as like a bottom of the roster dynasty guy.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, man. The Raiders offense, man. It's just I like just thinking through, especially teams that they're teed up to be in shootouts, and yet what's holding them back? Oh, the quarterback. But is Gardner Minshew that bad? Is Aiden O'Connell that bad? Actually, no.
Functional.
Actually, no. So, like, Tennessee is another situation that I love. You don't think they're going to be down big to the Texans, to the Jaguars? Yeah. It's an incredibly competitive division. They're going to be in comeback mode constantly, and they've acknowledged that. They said, okay, we're going to shed Derrick Henry, and we're going to go to only satellite backs or satellite back plus backs. And we're gonna bring in more wide receivers. Tennessee offense is gonna be fun.
Pass catchers galore on that
team. They improved the offensive coordinator, which I'm sure you're paying attention to, which I don't pay much attention to, but a lot of people do. There you go. How do you think the running back roles will shake out in Tennessee?
Oh man. Good question. What I want to know, Matt, is who is going to play on obvious passing downs? Which of those guys? Like, I suppose it's probably going to be mostly Pollard on early downs and mostly Spears on the obvious passing downs. I think
so. My problem is I have a Tony Pollard t-shirt. I love Tony Pollard. But Tajay Spears is phenomenal. Tajay Spears is better than Tony Pollard. Tajay Spears, only fell in the draft because of concerns around his knee. He was an electrified, savant receiver out of the backfield at the Senior Bowl. He was amazing. He had highlights like I've never seen at the Senior Bowl. He was doing things, putting people on skates, like him and Tank Dell. He was like the Tank Dell of receivers. So I think it's nice that they have a new coaching staff coming in and they're going to evaluate these guys on their merits. And I think that they're going to give Spears more touches than people think. So I'm leaning into Spears. He happens to have a little bit more friendly ADP, which is great. Maybe not so in Dynasty, but I still think in both, because Spears is many years younger, he's a better value in Dynasty. He's a better value on Underdog. On Underdog, his ADP is down almost a full round. He's now at slot 123, RB 38 on Underdog. Yes, please. Gimme that. His sleeper ADP in Dynasties, RB 28. Give me that. Gimme, man.
Yeah, and I sort of like Spears more in redraft or best ball than in Dynasty, Matt. And part of it is because I think people are sort of overconfident in Tony Pollard having like a 2/3 share of the touches in that backfield. I think it could be more like 60-40, 55-45. And I guess the reason I'm sort of concerned about Spears in Dynasty is the knee thing. Just like, are we going to see a Jay Ajayi type career where he's got the 1,500-yard breakout season and then just sort of disappears? Maybe. Like the knee can't hold up. Because isn't his condition pretty similar to what Ajayi had? Like no ACL, no cartilage in his knee.
I know, yes, that's true, but Ajayi just wasn't that good, period. Okay? Wasn't that good, period. It's interesting. On Underdog, both these guys, their ADP is down around in the last couple weeks.
Isn't Pollard like a low end RB2? Is he?
Yeah, he's going at RB
24.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So Pollard's going to RB 24, and then Spears is an RB 3, and it's an ambiguous backfield. I would argue Spears is a better player, so just go Spears. It's that simple. And Pollard also goes before Spears in Dynasty, and Pollard's 27 years old. That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
No.
How the hell is Pollard going ahead of Spears in Dynasty? But it's true. So, I mean, the problem is, a lot of these guys are getting crowded out by rookies. So the rookie ADPs all jump after the draft because now you have all the certainty. It makes sense, right? There's going to be a few rookies that slip, like Adonai Mitchell, and a bunch of rookies that surge after the draft, and they have to be displaced. That's why you see these guys falling. If you're a veteran that has an established role and nothing's changed, your ADP is minus a half round after the draft. How did that happen? Well, that's how. Right? What about Bijan? Is it possible that his ADP gets to 101 by the end of the summer?
Barring injury to Christian McCaffrey, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, his seasonal league ADP is right now on Underdog, it's 7, right? That's where he's going. Player number 7, RB2.
I know he's right behind in the overall Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I kind of expect him to pass Amon-Ra, and I think maybe he could pass Jefferson too once people start to reckon with the reality that Jefferson is going to be working with a rookie quarterback all year.
Just get as much as you can. Just get as much Bijan as you possibly can now where the ADP is still friendly. And yeah, he even dropped a little bit. He dipped a little bit after the draft because now there's a little bit of uncertainty around Kirk Cousins. A big part of his ADP being the RB2 has been, Kirk Cousins is going to, lead to more touchdowns, more efficient offense. And I'm not concerned about Cousins. I think we've seen these play. Even Aaron Rodgers said that he could have come back last year from a torn Achilles. The ruptured Achilles, that's had the most progress and with medical technology and the use of stem cells and these injections to help heal the muscle fibers and the tendon tissue. So. Yeah, no concerns at all. Everyone else is just surging. Everyone's all about these Falcons, but Bijan's just parked right there in the middle of the first round, and I think he should be in play to be the 101. It wasn't that long ago. Jonathon Taylor was the consensus 101, and Jonathon Taylor didn't have close to the fantasy upside of a Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, just didn't have the pass catching potential. Although
right. And I get it with Christian McCaffrey. I get it. It's just that Christian McCaffrey is now into his late 20s. And, that guy just starts to leak a little bit of upside. It's just on the margins, but it's something. Whereas you have one chance, one opportunity to get Bijan Robinson in year 2 when he's in the best case scenario for the offense. And his juice, like his fast twitch muscle fiber, his explosiveness will never be higher than it is right now. So get him on your team, play the shit out of him this year. That's what in all formats. I want him as the 101 in Dynasty. If you want to go Bijan over CeeDee Lamb, I don't even hate that. Go ahead. Like in a single quarterback Dynasty league, he should be in play for the 101 there. And now it's like, oh, no, you can't do that. You got to go CeeDee Lamb. You got to go Jamar Chase. You got to go with the receivers. Not necessarily. Second-year Bijan, where we've seen him exceed expectations as a receiver, this is a unique opportunity to take a running back at the 101. Because I would rarely do it. The idea that you can get the best receiver in the game in fantasy football in most formats, that's a gift horse. You just draft that. This just happens to be like moon and the stars aligning with Bijan. And I think it should be a conversation.
Plus, there are only 3 or 4 running backs who look, no one's foolproof with injuries. 3 or 4 guys who, barring injury, are pretty foolproof. And Bijan is clearly one of them. And why not grab one of those guys in the first round if you can? I was just in an underdog draft the other day, Matt. I opened with, I think from 108, Bijan and Jonathon Taylor. Got to admit, I got a little tingly after taking Taylor too. People just love taking wide receivers in underdog drafts, obviously. And
I hope that you stop drafting running backs after that.
I did. Yeah, the third forever. Running back.
Like until Tajay Spears or something.
15th round or
yes,
13th round or something like that. Yeah, but
that's robust RB, baby. Yeah, I love it. I kind of love it. If that scenario plays out that way, where you get Bijan that late, then just be thankful, push the button, have fun. That's what you do. But yeah, it's too easy to get him right now, and I don't think it's going to be this easy in a few months. The RB dead zone is alive and well, as it is most years. If you know what to look for, especially. We've got Travis Etienne and Rachaad White, I think, at the beginning of the dead zone. And I think those are the best options in the dead zone for sure. Unlike last year where Rachaad White was in the 7th round and it was like the best dead zone running back available at the end of the dead zone, which is, that's just such a rare case. That was the case for 0 RB. We don't have that this year where you have Etienne and White going earlier. Etienne's going 4th round, right? Which is where he went last year. 3rd round in some, but mostly 4th round. And then Rachaad White going 5th round on Underdog. He's now well into the 5th round on Underdog. So that's too easy to me. What do you think?
Yeah, White is a dead zone guy for sure. Underdog.
But you don't believe that he belongs there, right?
No,
no. We know. I can see the ADP. It is true. Again, we have the charts on Player Profile that show the ADPs. It is a fact that he's going at pick 54. It's almost not believable, but we had the data is there. We have it.
Is Bucky Irving scaring people away from Rachaad White? I mean,
mean,
to me, you would define Bucky Irving, Matt, I think, as a meat shield. Yes,
Bucky Irving's a great meat shield in that he's protecting I guess I don't even understand it. Like again, this is I'm like, we have to do this again where we have to run it back with Rachaad White. So I thought Rachaad White would be a 2-3 turn running back this year.
Yeah.
Like, remember where Pollard was going last year? Like, whatever you thought you could get from Pollard last year.
Early second in some drafts last year for Pollard.
Well, I mean, Pollard's ADP was settling in at the end of the second round, okay? Yep. Which is where I would expect Rachaad White. Like, Rachaad White's better than Pollard in all these ways, just didn't have the same offensive firepower in Tampa, but that's it. So to me, I mean, it's like that is continues to be the inexplicable ADP of all. ETN, though, I mean, he faded last year. I think that's fantasy gamers don't like that. If you fade and you tease people, you help them into the playoffs, then you kind of abandon them. Then I think that was also part of his ADP being sort of still parked at the beginning of the dead zone, because he was the RB3 overall, super durable, and yet going at pick 40 now.
He was, let's see, through the first 8 weeks, he was averaging 20.5 PPR points per game and was the RB2 in fantasy scoring. Then Jaguars had a week 9 bye. After the bye, week 10 through the end of the regular season, ETN averaged 13.2 PPR points per game, RB15 in total points, RB21 in fantasy points per game. So yeah, huge drop off. I had him on a redraft team that started like 7-1 and then just collapsed down the stretch. And ETN's drop off was a big reason for that. But Tank Bigsby, we've seen, not really a threat to his role. Dearness Johnson, really doubt he's a threat to his role. The only running back they drafted, Keelan Robinson, who I don't think a lot of people were expecting to see drafted at all. Yeah, Texas backup.
I know who it is, but I'm just saying.
Yeah,
no one knows who the fuck that is. And by the way, ETN did help you in a little thing I like to call the fantasy football championship game.
He did have a big week 17, did he not?
26 points, baby.
Yes.
So that was he hadn't gone over 100 total yards since week 8, exactly, since before the bye. That was the only week he really went nuclear in the second half, was championship week against the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah,
there were some tough matchups in there, man. He's playing San Francisco, he's playing Tennessee,
sure,
playing Cleveland, and there were some tough matchups in there.
I would dispute the categorization of him as a dead zone running back, though, Matt. Like right now, he's RB11 in Underdog and overall 38th. But we know Underdog drafters are gaga over wide receivers. I think in most home leagues, ETN is going to be a third rounder, maybe even a late second rounder.
That's right. That's right. That's fair. He's only really a dead zone back on Underdog. He won't be in real leagues. In traditional fantasy
home leagues, sure.
Yeah, in leagues where you set your lineup. So yeah, that's totally fair. You got me. Give me a dead zone running back that you're interested in. That's more of like a traditional like 5th, 6th rounder.
Kenneth Walker, does he count?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, like, I think I'd rather have Kenneth Walker than Travis Etienne, believe it or not. I know that's a minority opinion.
No, I want to hear why.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy who basically, he came out the same year as Breece Hall, and I think there were some people who actually liked Kenneth Walker more. Had a similar size speed profile, wildly productive in his 1 year at Michigan State. And I don't think he's really disappointed in his first 2 years in Seattle, but he's missed a couple of games both years. So that's kind of tamped down the overall numbers a bit. He's had 9 touchdowns each of his first 2 years in the league. Pretty solid on a per game basis. I think Zach Charbonnet is scaring some people away, but last year, I mean, he was basically out-touching Charbonnet by a 2-1 margin. I don't think Charbonnet is really a threat to Walker's role. So I just think he's kind of flying under the radar as a guy who could possibly take a big step up and be like, wouldn't surprise me at all if he gave you high-end running back one production in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, the case for Nick Chubb as a premium fantasy back is the same exact case you would make for Kenneth Walker. They're very similar players. He's a little bit lighter than Chubb, but as a runner, very similar. And he's not going to catch a lot of passes, but he's going to be the guy that's breaking long runs and scoring a lot of touchdowns. That guy can very easily finish as a top 10 fantasy back.
I think he might have broken more tackles than any back in the league the last 2 years.
Well, we would have that as an evaded tackle metric on playerprofiler.com. Y'all can check it out. You can go to data analysis, check out data analysis on Player Profiler, and you can just select the last 2 years, and you can see for yourself. Do you have a favorite late-round running back for best ball leagues?
Oh, late-round running back.
Like beyond Spears, like someone deep. Like mine is Roschon Johnson because I think that backfield is more ambiguous than it looks because I think that DeAndre Swift is fraudulent. He's the Devontae Parker of running backs. And I think that with another year of experience, I think that Roschon Johnson's you're going to see that the depth chart will come out publicly and that the Bears will have him ahead of Khalil Herbert. So for that reason, I think there's some get out ahead on Roschon Johnson. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, he's got a little broader skill set, I think, than Khalil Herbert. I'm still kind of an Antonio Gibson truther.
Oh yeah.
Matt. And like that's kind of the kind of situation where the struggles of the Patriots could play into Gibson's hands if they decide to make him like a pure passing down back, kind of the satellite back plus archetype that you've talked about.
Yeah.
Major upside if anything were to happen to Ramondre.
Explain to me how he's not better than Ramondre Stevenson. If you're an NFL coach, like I get that Ramondre Stevenson had a better fantasy season once upon a time than Antonio Gibson ever has, but Antonio Gibson also has multiple seasons with 10-plus touchdowns. So it's not like he hasn't scored fantasy points in his career. But if I'm going to deploy a running back anywhere, it's Gibson with the straight line speed, has more sort of long touchdown potential, and he's a much better receiver out of the backfield. Though, again, Stevenson is a quality receiver out of the backfield.
Yes.
Like he has soft hands for a big man. Everyone knows it. It's impressive. But the after-catch ability that Gibson has, in addition to him also having slick hands, is, it's just a better overall skill set, period, than Ramondre Stevenson. And again, I like that the new coaching staff comes in and they don't have any loyalty to these guys, so they could just have them practice and be like, listen, man, I mean, I get that Ramondre can break tackles. I get that he's reliable. But we're seeing explosiveness and game-breaking and game-changing ability from Antonio Gibson, man.
Size and speed, parallel with Jonathan Taylor, former college receiver, so we know he can catch passes. I felt like he was in a bad situation with an old guard coach like Ron Rivera because Gibson would fumble and he would get thrown into fumble jail. Like he would get benched and wouldn't see the light of day for a couple of weeks. And then he'd slowly work his way back into the good graces of Rivera and the coaching staff, and then he'd fumble again and it would be all out the window. So it was really frustrating. But I still think that potential is there. That a dude who scored double-digit touchdowns his first 2 years in the league.
What about a late-round receiver?
I mean, Michael Wilson was kind of an interesting one.
Yes.
You brought up before.
Yes. Chase the offense, man. Chase the offense, and the fact that we know there are going to be injuries. And also, in training camp, it could just come out that, Michael Wilson's, killing it. And it's one of the easiest things to imagine in the world, that Michael Wilson in his second year, super fundamentally sound wide receiver, is doing all the right things. Coaches love him. Building rapport with Kyler Murray from last year. It's easy to see.
Yeah. Is it crazy to think Luke McCaffrey could be impactful in year one?
Why not?
Uh, yeah, like that's sort of the thing. I feel like there's an opportunity there with a McLaurin is terrific. I still like Dotson, but there's a vacancy for a third receiver with Curtis Samuel gone. This is a guy with obviously great NFL bloodlines and like a late comer to the wide receiver position, but he was getting it at Rice. Like his last couple of years, you could see the growth and like the playmaking ability, and he's a freak athlete. So I'm kind of bullish on him as like a late round dart throw.
We have some interesting stats on Michael Wilson on Player Profiler. Target premium plus 31.2%, number 6. That means what percentage on a per target basis is he delivering? What percentage above or below 0 compared to the other receivers on the Cardinals? Right, so this factors out quarterback play. Right? You want to factor out quarterback play because there was inconsistent quarterback play halfway through the season. They changed. You know, they bring in Kyler Murray. He finally gets healthy. It wasn't even. When did Murray finally start? It wasn't until later in the season.
Yeah. Trying to think when they brought him back.
It was well into the second half. So you have, you know, subpar quarterback play, suppressing all your metrics. Target premium just looks at your fantasy points per target compared to the other receivers on your team. And he was getting more than 30% more fantasy production on a per target basis compared to those other receivers, those Greg Dortches and those Rondale Moores. As a rookie, that's super impressive to have the number 6 overall target premium among NFL wide receivers. Then he had a plus 15, number 5 in the NFL production premium, which looks at every down and distance for which you produced, right? So that helps, like if you are scoring a lot of touchdowns or generating a lot of fantasy points inside the 20, well, you're only going to be compared to the other receivers that they got targets inside the 20. So it's comparing apples to apples, all your targets. So when you compare the down and distance in the game situation, apples to apples, all the targets for Michael Wilson compared to all the other targets for all the other wide receivers around the league, top 5. So Michael Wilson, very efficient last year. Also top 15 if you just want to look at something more simple like yards per target. Okay. So, and there's a rookie. Like I know that he's one of the best rookies we've ever seen in Marvin Harrison, but still a rookie. Okay. So to me, I think you're right. I also believe you got the team right. I just think you got the player wrong in Washington because I am on board with Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson flamed out in his sophomore year, but we've seen receivers have these oscillating years, right? And I just think that he was lucky as a rookie. As a sophomore, he was unlucky. And we're going to see it all balance out this year. But what we've seen from him, especially when you zoom out and you go back to his time at Penn State, Jahan Dotson was impressive. Right? He's a you know, in that archetype where you could see a year 3 breakout. It's a rare thing because typically a first-round receiver that doesn't produce for the first 2 years of his career, it's over. Right? Especially when you see the air yards go down, right? But the targets jumped up. And I know he played more games, but he still went from 61 to 83 targets. He still went from 35 to 49 receptions. So even though he wasn't scoring the fantasy points on a per game basis like he was the year before, and there's no target premium stat I can point to. Like his yards per target, 6.2, number 86. So there wasn't any big efficiency metric I can go, yeah, he actually did have a good 2023 season. Dotson had a horrible season.
Well, you can make the case, though, that was kind of Sam Howell related. Like,
yeah,
I think
man.
Sam Howell was, even though Sam Howell was throwing a lot of passes, leading the NFL in pass attempts at one point, he was also much more comfortable, it seemed like, throwing between the hashes and to the middle of the field rather than outside. And Jahan Dotson was doing most of his work on the boundaries. Just didn't seem like it was a good fit. I think things are going to be a little different with Jaden Daniels. So
Yeah,
and
I mean,
considering
Tyler Lockett is the best comparable to Jahan Dotson. He broke out in year 4. These are similar guys, very similar players, actually, when you look at their profiles. It's just that Tyler Lockett was drafted at a time when players with his profile went day 2. When now we're in a different time where players with that profile go in the first round now. And Underdog drafters have noticed. What's interesting, we talked about veterans. They have this overall sort of ADP displacement where they're falling 6 picks just on principle because all these rookies have to move up. Dotson's up around as a veteran. That's pretty good, right? Because, again, Washington didn't draft a receiver until Luke McCaffrey. And Luke McCaffrey is just not respected by fantasy gamers, and I think that he has to earn that respect. Dotson's teed up as the number 2 in an offense that's bound to improve.
what do you think about Darnell Mooney?
Yes. Oh, that's another great one.
More about best ball, I think,
Yes.
than managed leagues, but going wide receiver 68, I think, on Underdog.
Yep.
And Darnell Mooney's good. He's actually good.
Yes.
And for a while, miscast as a lead receiver for the Bears a couple of years ago. But as a vertical threat, really interesting. And now he's got the quarterbacks who can make it happen for him.
Oh, God. Yeah, Mooney, his ADP is just wrong. 150 on Underdog. That doesn't make sense. Like you said, he's had a 1,000-yard season, for crying out loud.
Right.
So I think we've nailed it. I think those 3, because I'm super bullish on all 3 offenses. I think that Washington's going to have a complete resurgence on offense this year. Love Arizona's offense this year. Love the Cardinals' offense. I mean, I love the Falcons' offense. I love these. These are the offenses that are poised to surge. And one has a quarterback that's finally healthy and mobile. One has a brand new stud quarterback who's mobile, and the other has a brand new sort of pocket passer that's been prolific. So if you just go look at some teams getting quarterback upgrades, whether it's health or whether it's just a quarterback change, and you think about what other receivers have been added or lost from the offense. In Washington, they've shed receivers. Arizona shed Marquise Brown. Falcons added Darnell Mooney after not having a wide receiver 2 of consequence prior, and it's still up in the air what Kyle Pitts is going to be. It's still up in the air what Drake London's going to be. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen the tight end 1. We have for Pitts as a rookie, but we haven't seen the tight end 1 for Pitts lately. And we haven't seen wide receiver 1, which is where he's being drafted now. We haven't seen anything close to that for Drake London. So on principle, you just go Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, great way to close out a draft, I think.
Yeah, one thing we know is their offense is going to take a step forward. That's the one thing. So, yeah, Cousins, Mooney, like Cousins, Pitts, Mooney, and leave Drake London out because you can't get Drake London. Like other players like a Mooney, you can get Mooney if you want Mooney. If you want Pitts, you can get Pitts. You want Cousins, you can get Cousins. If you want Drake London, well, it just depends on what your draft spot is. Right? So if you want to go in knowing, hey, I'm going to get this stack. I'm going to stack up these Falcons. The one stack you can get is Cousins, Mooney, Pitts without reaching too much. That's why I don't worry too much about stacking early. Even if you feel like you're reaching for stacks early, because you can always backdoor stack something like a Cousins Mooney.
Oh yeah, that's a really nice later stack.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Would you have another stack that you like?
Yeah, it's not quite as late as that, but how about Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin?
Oh God.
I mean, you mentioned McLaurin's ADP and Underdog is hold on, I've got this here. Wide receiver 33. Like that's just obscene.
Yeah, we'll do both. Also, add Dotson, add McCaffrey. Nice little double stack there.
Yeah. Plus, you get the rushing upside with Jaden Daniels. That could be a pretty glorious stack. And like you said, if you miss out on McLaurin, you could still do it with Dotson later on or
Oh,
McCaffrey.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right. So I have 10 burning questions. 10 burning questions
All right. Let's do it.
after this. By Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly. Especially now, it's Best Ball Mania season, baby. Best Ball Mania 5. I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off. I like that as a tagline for Underdog. Go draft your ass off.
I know. Like, you didn't get fed that by the Underdog marketing guys?
No,
that
wasn't on
entirely?
No, it wasn't on the treatment.
They should steal that from you. Absolutely.
They let me do what I want kind of with the promos, and I really appreciate that. It's one of my other favorite things about Underdog is just the freedom, the artistic freedom that they allow. It's great.
They're fantastic.
So how are you approaching rookie drafts this year? Let's talk rookies. Like, my burning questions are rookie related. So how do you when you go into a rookie draft, I've talked about this many times that I'm going receiver typically in the first round, and then I'm just going to pound running back.
Yeah, mostly BPA, mostly best player available. But I've heard you state your philosophy on this about the running back value, and yeah, I mean, I see it. I do like maybe the second tier wide receivers in this class a little more than I like some of the second tier running backs, but I don't know. Gotta look at that on a case by case basis, I guess. So generally, I mean, I've been coming out of drafts with at least one, if not two running backs, at least one, if not two wide receivers. And there are a couple tight ends I like. That's the thing. Like, if you can't get Bowers, there are two other tight ends I like in this entire class, and they can be Benson and Eric All. That's about it. I'm not even that interested in Jatavian Sanders. All is the guy I want as my fourth rounder in every draft, maybe even fifth if you could get him there. Just a guy who I think would be a lot held in much higher regard if he had not run into the sort of injury situations he encountered in college. And there's reason to believe that's behind him. One of the big things he had was a back issue that he's had surgery for, and he says it was like, just after he had the surgery, new lease on life for him. Totally went away, and hopefully continues to be the case.
So he is like the Michael Wilson of tight ends, pretty much.
Right. Wilson had the elaborate injury history in college, and that sort of dinged him in his prospect profile, but seems like that's kind of behind him now.
So I've heard from some news sources, their analysis at least of the coach speak, that Kyren Williams' role as the RB1 in Los Angeles is secure. I've heard that, because they've come out and said that, they were just worried about managing his workload. That's why they drafted Blake Corum. Nothing to see here, everybody. His role is secure. Secure. Would you call Kyren Williams' role secure?
I sort of think so. I mean, Kyren was objectively good last year, and Sean McVay does tend to be pretty monogamous with his running backs. Has been, doesn't mean he necessarily will be, but I mean, barring injury, I think it's going to be mostly Kyren with a little bit of Corum mixed in, since Kyren is a smaller back and might need a tag team partner to take at least 25-30% of the load. But who knows? I mean, I thought Blake Corum was the best pure runner in this class, better than Benson, better than Brooks, just as a runner. Obviously doesn't have the size and speed that those guys have, but And that's part of it for the Rams. I think that they feel Corum is a 1-for-1 replacement for Kyren Williams, a smaller, slower back who's just a really instinctive, good runner with really good contact balance. And if anything happens to Kyren, they can put Corum in and not lose a beat.
You're wrong about that.
Which
you
part?
Just got done saying that Blake Corum was the best runner in the class.
But was Kyren not good last year? I mean,
he was fine. He was fine. He wasn't even the receiver that people thought he was going to be. He wasn't the target commander that you even saw at Notre Dame. And he had one of the worst pass protection grades. I think that they looked at the pass protection grades. They looked at his overall play and said, hey, this guy put up fantasy points. But in real life, when we're breaking down the film every week, there were yards left on the field by Kyren Williams. There were pass blocks that he should have made, could have made, and could have got Matthew Stafford hurt. And we're going to bring in a guy that looks exactly like Blake Corum to solve for all those shortcomings. That means that it's not necessarily just because the trend was true in the past that, oh, Coach X doesn't rotate backs during games doesn't mean he can't start because they learned a lesson last year. Like that's to me, it's almost insulting to Sean McVay to think that he can't change his trends at all based on what happened last year.
Sure. I mean, we've just seen him operate that way over multiple seasons. It's entirely possible. So you think that's the more likely case, that they are 50-50 rather than Corum just flat out leapfrogging Kyren?
They drafted him in the 3rd round. The guy's a national champion. Like there are, I'm sure, many scouts and front office executives that look at a Blake Corum and go, this is a premium running back prospect. Right? And that's what they drafted. They didn't draft a fringe guy in the 6th round. That's the thing. They used real capital on him. They're not going to do that and not play him. They wouldn't do that with another position, right? You're assuming that Washington's going to play Luke McCaffrey, aren't you?
Day 2 pick.
Yeah, day 2 pick. You're going to assume these guys are going to play. The Packers played Jaden Reed last year, didn't they?
Sure. Another day 2 pick.
I mean, come on. Like they're going to play him, okay? They're going to play him. The question is how much and how long it takes. Will Kyren Williams be the starter in the fantasy playoffs? I say no, because there's the injury possibility and the fact that it just over the course of the season, the trustworthiness of Blake Corum eventually wins the day. And so, just chip away by week 13, suddenly you look up and it's 55-45 Corum. So there's 2 ways that Kyren Williams can disappoint you. It's the fact that he broke down last year because he's undersized and he doesn't have the speed to get away from defenders. That's a big problem for him, okay, fundamentally. And then there's just the idea that they have one of the better runners from college football coming in, and he's an all-purpose back that doesn't make mistakes. And sometimes at the running back position, that's all you really want. And it has nothing to do, whatever happens this year has nothing to do with the fantasy performance of Kyren Williams last year. I can guarantee you none of those coaches have any idea the kind of fantasy production that Kyren Williams put up. And if you told them, they wouldn't even believe you. Right? And they were there. Like, they were there. But if you told them, you're like, hey, can you believe Kyren Williams was like the RB2 during this period of time? That coach would be like, get out of town. Really? Kyren Williams was? Huh. We were there, but we didn't realize it, right? He was just falling forward and found his way into the end zone. But, we didn't get down to the goal line because of him or anything. In some cases they did, sure. But I bet that. I mean, I've had this happen to me where I asked a coach, hey, how do you think player X did in fantasy last year? And then their answer was way off. Way off. And that was an aha moment for me. I'm like, wait, these people have no idea. Right? They're looking at something else. And that was what I was worried about all along with Kyren Williams. Do you think that Ray Davis will have a sneaky big impact in Buffalo? Because this is where I'm going with this. James Cook is better than Kyren Williams, but I don't know if the Bills think that.
Yeah, I mean, I buy that, like Kyren Williams, James Cook as another sub 200-pound running back needs a tag team partner. And Ray Davis is a good tag team partner for him.
He is.
And yeah, could Ray Davis pass James Cook? Kind of another one of those scenarios where I'm not ready to predict it.
That's way hard. That's so much harder to predict because Ray Davis is not as good as Blake Corum, and James Cook's yes, he's small, but at least he gives you the explosiveness that
everything but the
Kyren Williams
touchdowns
doesn't have.
Last year, we got everything from the touchdowns. Everything but the touchdowns from Cook last year. It was terrific. Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting. The targets peaked in week 1 with 6. Then he had 7 in week 12. And then it was weird. He didn't come close to that. The rest of the season, he had 3 and then 0, 2, 3, 4.
Allen doesn't look to check down. Allen,
that's the issue. He had a bunch of games with 1 or 0 catches because if teams are going to give Josh Allen that room, he will just take it. That's the issue. That's why the reception total is never going to be what you'd like it to be. 44 receptions, it seems like he has a hard cap at 50 receptions.
The catches are plays where he is running actual routes most of the time. They just don't use – Allen doesn't use his running backs as just emergency outlets. He'd rather just take it himself.
And Cook, he's now a dead zone running back. He's a quintessential dead zone running back that I would be much more cautious about than, say, a Kenneth Walker. Think about Cook versus Walker. Think about Cook versus White. Same ADPs, right? But Cook is way more fragile. Cook is smaller. His team just drafted Ray Davis, and with the mobile quarterback, and he's typically going to be in a satellite back role, doing a lot of his production out of the backfield in the passing game. Now that's capped because of Josh Allen. It's scary. There's I don't know why I would swing on a James Cook when I know I can just bank Kenneth Walker, Rachaad White.
Agreed.
Yeah. Now, Michael Penix, right? We talked about him earlier, just in the overall analysis of the draft. You thought that was the most surprising thing. That makes sense. Question is, in a single quarterback draft, this was a debate we had in the Sonic Truth, where should Penix be drafted?
Single QB dynasty.
Single QB or Superflex. We're talking about them both.
All right, flex, I feel like early part of the second. Just the importance of quarterbacks in that
You'll never
format.
get him there. You'll never get him there.
He has slipped into the second in most of the rookie drafts I've done so far, but really early second.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, 201, 202, 203.
Okay. Maybe.
Generally in that range.
Maybe. I've seen most of mine, I've seen him go 111.
Yeah.
But these are very sharp players, man. They are not going to let Penix go.
Right. And they're fine with waiting a year or two if they have to. And
or there's a setback with the Achilles. I know we said that the medical technology with Achilles ruptures is night and day what it was, but I mean, clearly the NFL hearted Michael Penix, unlike fantasy gamers, where fantasy gamers were like, well, I can't believe the NFL is not going to be all in on JJ McCarthy. And it's just funny. Think about this for a second. That's another aspect that's fascinating. Fantasy gamers would typically love Michael Penix. Right? They want to grab that Penix and never let go. Right? So you would think that the fantasy gamers would be sort of pushing up Penix like they did Malik Willis. Remember fantasy gamers were higher on Malik Willis than the draft public, the draft analysts. But this was the opposite, where fantasy gamers were assuming it was going to be J.J. McCarthy, and this Penix pick took them completely by surprise. And it's like, wait. No, the NFL's doing what you want them to. Celebrate this. This is great. They loved him. Even though he didn't look impressive against Michigan. It didn't matter. The NFL scouts are starting to look at a much more of a broad profile of these prospects. It's all great news. And how can you not push the button on a dynamic quarterback who was drafted in the top 10, where quarterbacks, their peak production is from age 27 through age 35? And he's coming into those weapons?
People are overestimating the age thing. Fantasy gamers are, for sure. And you know why, Matt, the NFL looks at Penix so differently than fantasy gamers look at him? Because the fantasy gamers value rushing potential, the Konami code thing.
Yeah.
And NFL teams, I think, care more about sack avoidance. And that's why fantasy gamers in the NFL had a much different perspective on Justin Fields, who just took sacks by the crate load. And that just short circuits an offense so badly in the NFL, whereas Michael Penix was getting sacked less than once a game as the starter for the University of Washington. And I think NFL teams really value that, coupled with the arm talent Penix has.
He has the big arm, too. We didn't even talk about the big arm.
Oh, great.
The big arm down to Darnell Mooney, the big arm to Kyle Pitts down the seam. How do you not love that? Anyone that's in a league that's super flex, where Penix goes in the second round, should be embarrassed. Should be embarrassed to be in that league. And for me, I think that he's in play at the 2-3 turn, even in single quarterback, because he is an impact player. Once you get to the 2-3 turn in single quarterback, do you know where we're at that point? You know the types of players that are getting drafted? You're talking about day 3 picks. As soon as you start trying to tell me about day 3 picks, I'm just going Penix.
Yeah, the only pushback I would give you on that, Matt, is that because he's not going to be a runner, even though he ran the 4.5 something at his pro day or whatever, we know he's not going to run
plenty.
You think he's going to run? You think he gets more than, if he starts for a full season, you think he gets more than 250 rushing yards?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. Please.
I mean, if it was Indiana Michael Penix, I would give you that. I don't know if Washington Michael Penix is that kind of a runner anymore.
You know who's going at the 2-3 turn in single quarterback leagues?
Who?
Xavier Legette is going even earlier than that. Malachi Corley, Jalen Polk, Troy Franklin, Tyrone Tracy, Kamani Vidal, Ben Sinnott. Of all those guys, yes, I would be drafting Tracy and Vidal. I love Tracy and Vidal, right? Of course. But Penix right there. But again, Vidal is a 5th rounder, 6th rounder. Right? Tracy 5th round, Vidal 6th round. Penix 8 overall. Longer term, who's going to give you more fantasy points that help you win matchups for your dynasty team? Is it going to be Tyrone Tracy or is it going to be Michael Penix?
I mean, probably Penix, but I do think the law of supply and demand weighs into this, Matt, because there are a lot of fantasy viable quarterbacks, and there are only 12 who start in any given week.
I know, but most teams are rostering 2 and 3. I've been in these single quarterback leagues where a lot of the teams will roster 3 quarterbacks, and the waiver wire is not what you think. It's just not, man. It's not. It's really valuable to have a Michael Penix. I'm telling you, there's theoretically, just because theoretically it doesn't make sense to have 3 quarterbacks rostered in a single quarterback format, plenty of people do it. Okay? Who is your wide receiver 5 this year?
I think it's technically Keon Coleman, but I consider it kind of a tie between Keon and Ladd McConkey.
Okay, it should be Ladd McConkey. Okay. I also think that Roman Wilson belongs in the conversation because he's just that good.
I like him. I mean, he's top 10 for me. I like the player. The target outlook seems pretty rosy. Arthur Smith, obviously a wild card. We thought the target outlook for Drake London looked rosy last year, and they were wasting targets on Kadarius Hodge and Scotty Miller. Right. So,
pretty straight line for him to be the starting receiver, sure, even in 2 receiver sets in Pittsburgh. So, what else? What else can I do, man? I mean, I think that he's going to be a starter, you know, just as soon as Keon Coleman's going to be a starter. He's going to be a starter before Ricky Pearsall. The only thing that is keeping Pearsall above Wilson in any rankings is draft capital. That is it.
Yep.
And like rumors that maybe a 49er receiver is going to get traded. Pearsall's not the well, I should say there's 2 things. There's the draft capital and that one catch. The one-handed catch, the Pearsall one-handed catch. Otherwise, you just look at these guys, their resumes, and how they perform throughout the process. Roman Wilson, he even runs a 4.39. Like, he's a sick athlete.
And he does fall in rookie drafts. Like, yes, he always seems to fall past the point where I think he should be. Like, I think he should be at worst like a mid-second rounder. And he routinely falls to the end of the second round, maybe even third sometimes. And I don't get it. So I'm with you there.
And he didn't work out these other, you know, he doesn't have a burst score, doesn't have an agility score. He didn't work out as much as like an Odunze did at the combine. So he's protecting himself a little bit there. I understand how he fell to the 20th pick, but Pittsburgh moves in, steps in, and they have a great track record with scouting wide receivers. The guy had like over 16 yards per reception last year. A lot of target competition there.
I agree. He should be going ahead of Xavier Legette and A.D. Mitchell.
I'm so tired of like these anchoring to my pre-draft rankings with Adonai Mitchell or over-adjusting based on Legette's new draft capital or Ricky Pearsall's new draft capital. It's like all along, Roman Wilson was just a better player, right? Overall, just a better player. And anyone that went to the Senior Bowl and went to the Combine walked away thinking, oh, Roman Wilson's better than Adonai Mitchell here. But, you know, the NFL seems to like Adonai Mitchell, so I can't change him. Right? And then, the NFL doesn't respect Adonai Mitchell like you thought. So you're going to correct it and move Wilson ahead? Like, to me, that's the easiest one. That's the one I'm super tempted to get off my sort of philosophy of just pounding running backs and go Roman Wilson. That's going to be good, man. He's such a high floor player. Right, he's a high character, high work ethic guy that also runs the sub 4.4, that also was a national champion, that also, had a 40% dominator rating. I mean,
right. That's the thing. He tested well too. If he didn't test well, I could understand why maybe some people would like Adonai Mitchell or.
He is in the center of the Venn diagram. Like, yes. if you're get ready for a 3rd round receiver to hit. You know, Tank Dell last year. Okay, well, that guy's going to be Roman Wilson. I don't think so. I don't think that we're going to have both a spectacular round 3 breakout and a spectacular day 3 breakout. Last year was pretty rare where you had both Tank Dell and Puka Nacua breaking out all over the place. I don't think we're going to have that this year. I think that's partly why wide receivers are getting bid up so much in rookie drafts compared to the running backs. And this is also a famously weak running back class. So I think that's what's tilting everybody to going Pearsall and going Legette when they really should be drafting a Corum, or if they're going to draft a receiver, it should be Wilson.
Yeah, and not just rookie drafts, Matt. Wide receiver 71 in underdog drafts.
Oh
Roman
my
Wilson.
God. There's
Great
another
value.
one. We talk about late round. We've given you all the guys now. We've given you all the guys that they're locked into big roles. Like Michael Wilson gonna have a role. Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 2 on his team. Roman Wilson, wide receiver 2 on his team. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver 2 on his team. And
all going beyond
what
wide
else?
receiver
That
60.
team getting a quarterback upgrade. Wide receiver 2s on teams with quarterback improvement or quarterback upgrades, who just also happen to be good football players. Those 4 guys late in every format. Jonathan Brooks versus Trey Benson. A lot of people really like Jonathan Brooks. He's moving up. The more people break down his film, the more people talk about Jonathan Brooks, the more they like. And the opposite is true with Benson. The more that, the more distance we have from the 40 time at the combine, the more Benson's getting picked apart. Where do you land with these guys?
Slight but not overwhelming preference for Jonathan Brooks, just because I think he has a more direct route to be the lead running back on his team, and because he did actually play a lead role in his final college season. Like Brooks averaged close to 20 touches a game at Texas last year before he got hurt. About 140 yards from scrimmage a game, a touchdown a game. I like Benson too, and the size-speed combination is not unlike that of Breece Hall. It's just that Benson is probably not going to usurp James Conner right away in the Arizona backfield, and Benson didn't really operate as the do-everything running back at Florida State. His 2 years there, he averaged like 12 carries a game. So he's kind of been a part-time running back. And I just wonder if we might not see sort of the same thing we saw with Dameon Pierce, where he comes in and goes from being a part-timer to being a full-timer right away and sort of struggles with it. So, well, he's probably not going to get the opportunity to be a full-timer right away, barring injury. But I don't know. For Brooks, it's more about the clearer path to lead running back status.
I mean, is he going to get the Chuba Hubbard role from last year? Chuba Hubbard was also an explosive 2,000-yard receiver, 2,000-yard rusher in college. At the end of the day, the metric that we look at most closely for running backs that is super predictive is speed score. And the speed score for Trey Benson is off the charts, man. And it's a player that landed perfectly in the right team, right situation. If you like all these receivers on Arizona, you love Kyler Murray, then you have to love the running back. And if you despise what is going on in Carolina with their front office, and there's no hope of this offense turning around and it just being stuck in the mud for years and years, that's the case. I know what I know, and I know what I don't. I can't tell you with the type of certainty that some others can that Jonathan Brooks' skill set as a tackle breaker, as a tackle avoider, as a long breakaway runner, as an option out of the backfield as a receiver, is so much better than Trey Benson from what I watch. Right? I've been wrong so many times. I've stopped doing it. I've stopped going like, I watched film on this guy. He looked explosive. Like I watched Tevin Coleman at Indiana put up 2,000 yards, and I couldn't believe how dynamic he was. And it was like, oh, he's a straight line runner. He's too upright. And then as it turns out, him being too upright actually made him very injury prone, and that became a big problem for him. But to me, what I saw was a super explosive guy. And then in other cases, like a guy looks super nimble and he's super elusive. And then I don't see that in the NFL. So many times my eyes lie to me that, it's okay to just fall back on, hey, does this guy have like the singular athleticism metric you care about, speed score, and did he land well? And yes on Trey Benson. So I'm not drafting Jonathan Brooks as high as others or as aggressively as others, especially in Superflex. I've seen Jonathan Brooks go pretty high in Superflex in some drafts. Some people are pushing him up.
I've seen him
right?
go ahead of Roma Odunze and Brock Bowers in a couple of drafts that I've done.
He's getting pushed up, and I just can't get there. I'm a guy that's gonna get my Odunze in the first round, and then I'm going running back later. And if you want to, I just don't. I don't trust it enough. I don't trust myself enough in my evaluation. I love Jonathan Brooks. We were talking about him like crazy all offseason before the draft. And yet now it seems like the shark has been jumped.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't let Alex Dunlap and Cody hear you badmouth Jonathan Brooks. Like you're going to be you're going to be out of the Texas posse.
I love Jonathan Brooks. I love him. I just don't love him over Brock Bowers and Roma Odunze. Get out of town, man. Get out of here. He's on the Panthers. This is not good. Right? I mean, we would have if Audric Estime was drafted high, and everyone was talking about his film and how he's faster than he tested and all this, right? At the end of the day, I'd be like, that's all fine, but he's on the Broncos. This is going to be a problem, right? I don't want a running back on the Broncos. Thank you very much. Okay? That's not the upside's just not there. So, I mean, and it's not going to change anytime soon. And I don't trust the Carolina Panthers. Like, if there's one, I'm allowed to say, hey, there's one team out there that I just don't draft the Bryce Youngs. I don't draft the Jonathan Mingos just because I don't trust this franchise, right? Typically, I think that's kind of a silly non-answer and just complete gibberish because the team you think is run poorly suddenly, you're Jerry Jones and you go from drafting Ezekiel Elliott to going running backless, So things change, even as same guy just getting older, philosophies change. So typically, I would dismiss that. But if you just want to say one, if you want to make one team and be like, you know what, I just for the next 3 years I don't trust Carolina, and why am I investing in this team in Dynasty? I don't have to. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, it's fair. You might miss out on one or two guys, but you're also
going to
You're going to dodge some landmines. Maybe.
I mean, maybe. What is best case scenario for Jonathan Brooks? I mean, he would have to have a major step forward from Bryce Young. So that you'd have to have improvement on the offensive line. There would need to be a lot of things click into place. Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard are just going to have to fade away. Like, there's just a lot of things that have to happen. I think that also that Chuba Hubbard is not going to fade away either. Miles Sanders, sure. Miles Sanders, maybe he gets cut. Who knows? But, pretty thin thread to pull on.
Yeah,
with Jonathan Brooks.
I can understand your reluctance to run into a minefield to recover a watch that you dropped.
When he was going at the 1-2 turn, I was pounding the shit out of it. Okay? When, I could take him right after, the Bowers but as soon as he starts going ahead of some of these quarterbacks, like in Superflex, if he's going ahead of Penix, if he's going ahead of McCarthy, if he's going ahead of Odunze, then it's like, okay, well now, what happened, man? Like, in these earlier drafts I was doing, running backs weren't going until pick 15. Now he's going pick 7? What changed? He went to Carolina? Like, what, can we just take a step back and what are we talking about here? I love Jonathan Brooks. How do you feel about the Raiders backfield, by the way?
Probably that Zamir is the early down guy and Laube winds up being the passing down guy, and the roles are pretty clearly defined. I mean, like Zamir just doesn't have pass catching upside. It's not really a thing he's ever been especially proficient at, and I think Laube is going to be a great passing down back. Like I'll be shocked if he doesn't just shove Amir Abdullah out of the way.
I think it's too easy. Let's look. The reason I asked this question is because I just want to keep coming back to Lobby's underdog ADP is the final round. Okay?
Good way to spend.
Final round.
Yeah. I mean, Madison, I don't know what role Madison is going to play. Like, he's kind of the wild card in this, but I'm sure you probably agree that Madison is not really an obstacle to.
Is he going to be on the team? I don't even know if Madison's going to be on the team. Okay, he is dust. He is the dustiest of dust. End of the draft, last round, it has to be Dylan Lobby. It has to be. He's going to have spike weeks. I mean, if I know one thing, it's Dylan Lobby's going to have spike weeks.
I like him. And I don't even think this is your New England bias talking, Matt.
It's my bias in favor of athleticism. It's my bias in favor of incredible pass-catching ability, of college dominance. That's my bias. If that's my bias, then I'm not sorry.
Yeah. No, it's the profile of an NFL satellite back, for sure.
Now, where I get into trouble with my bias is, you know, I'm getting really out over my skis with Tyrone Tracy. And then the news comes out, oh, well, coaches believe that it's Eric Gray is going to be the RB2. And so Eric Gray was a nifty little player in college, but he got blown up in pass pro at the Senior Bowl, was blown up in the NFL last year. Tyrone Tracy is electric. Like, it's worth taking a step back, looking at these lobbies, the Tracys, all these super athlete running backs that went in the third round or went on day 3. I mean, it is a better class than was advertised, especially, and we knew it after the combine. And yet, because so many of these NFL teams have embraced analytics in the extreme, they're now letting players like Dylan Lobby go. Like, there were years that would go by, and there wasn't a single running back drafted that I said, oh, if I were a GM, I would have taken him earlier. I mean, there were years, Pat, that you couldn't pick one, where I thought every running back went rounds before they deserved to go. Now, again, this goes back to the push and pull and how so many NFL front offices have improved, but they've also done some overcorrecting in their zeal to punish the running back position. They've gone a little too far, where finally I'm looking up and going, Dylan Lobby going end of the 6th round is wrong. Wrong. If I'm an NFL GM, he's not getting out of the 5th round, period.
Yeah, it was surprising that you went that late. But the Eric Gray versus Tyrone Tracy thing, I mean, Matt, there is this really cool website called playerprofiler.com that you should check out. It's they do a really good job of measuring player athleticism and displaying it in eye-catching ways on their website.
Tells the story, doesn't it?
And if you look at Eric Gray versus Tyrone Tracy, you would find it preposterous to the premise that Eric Gray might be able to hold off Tyrone Tracy when Eric Gray is a mediocre athlete at best, and Tyrone Tracy is tremendously athletic and like a newcomer to the position too. So there's a lot of upside for him as a converted wide receiver.
But because he's new to the position,
they could slow
see
roll
him
it.
Also having ball security issues in camp, and coaches, because the coaches do what they're going to do, he opens the year as the third running back. This is very possible. I just want to prepare everybody. I'm preparing because I'm very in on Tracy. I'm just preparing everybody. I've seen some things, and this is a possibility. So don't hold back. Draft all the Tracy you can in rookie drafts, but just know that we might have to get through some high anxiety early in the season. And to me, it's just going to be a buying opportunity for Tracy. What about sleeper receivers? So you are the type of person that would draft receivers late in a rookie draft. Beyond Luke McCaffrey, do you have a full sleeper, like a day 3 sleeper?
Jalen McMillan went day 2, didn't he? Does he count?
Did he?
Or was he 4th? I can't remember if he was 3rd or 4th.
He did. That would be...
It was either late-ish third or fourth.
No, he did. You're right. He
He
did.
did win.
I think that still counts as a sleeper.
Okay. I was surprised that Jalen Polk went early second and Jalen McMillan went late third, when I think it's entirely possible McMillan turns out to be the better player and was kind of the better player, at least in 2022, where, like, if Jalen McMillan hadn't gotten hurt and had this, I think it was a knee injury that he kind of tried to play through a little bit and kept re-injuring himself and just wasn't himself, I don't know if Jalen Polk becomes a thing for the Washington Huskies, because, I mean, in 2022, Jalen McMillan had more receptions and touchdowns than Rome Odunze. Like, he was terrific. That. And, like, he's got his path to success in the NFL. Like, he's really good against zone defenses, and we know that the NFL is playing more zone than ever before. So, like, this is his path. The only thing I don't like is that he's probably not going to do much for you in 2024, because the Buccaneers have said they're going to move Chris Godwin back to the slot. And great for Godwin.
By Godwin.
Probably not great for the rookie production of Jalen McMillan. But I think Godwin is going into the final year of his contract. So maybe things are different in 2025, and McMillan has that slot role and could potentially be a high volume receiver. I mean, I don't know about 100 catch high volume, but I think he could be really productive. So I like Jalen McMillan a lot. And he seems like he's a kind of a guy who slides through the cracks and not a lot of people talk about in this rookie class.
80 catches, 9 touchdowns in 2022. Very impressive. Give us a deep guy in Dynasty that you're still holding on to, a truther guy.
Oh, a truther guy? Oh, my God. Well, man, like, the two guys I've gone to bat for in past years and have fallen on my face with are, like, Trey Lance and Rondale Moore are the two guys. But if those two guys are disasters at sea, I think Trey Lance is the Titanic and Rondale is merely the Lusitania.
Okay.
Like, the thing about Trey Lance, Matt, like, he hasn't really failed on the field in NFL games. That's the thing. Like, he's failed to get on the field and earn his way on, and he's failed to beat out Brock Purdy. But like, he never really gave us an extended NFL sample size, game sample, where we looked at him and said, this guy sucks. He can't play.
Oh, you can't drop him. If your
right.
Dynasty League has any depth whatsoever, if you have a taxi squad, you can't drop Trey Lance.
Oh, I'm lugging him around in like 2 or 3 Dynasty leagues.
You can't do it.
Still.
Yeah, he's got way too much upside. In single quarterback, super flex, I mean, you got to hold on. You got to hold on, and you got to make him prove that he can't play.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it yet.
Like, we know he can run, because he has done that when he's got an NFL game experience.
If we're going to doubt coaches and we're going to, condescend and mock those that are, leading with the coach analysis when they break down players, if that's going to be our mode of operating, then you also can't just trust Kyle Shanahan implicitly. You have to go back and look at a guy that it's like a 6'5" hyper athlete with a cannon arm and be like, well, I'm going to, just in case that, Purdy's that good and the guy just couldn't get on the field because he had a MVP candidate quarterback ahead of him. It happened. I don't think he's Steve Young, but Steve Young had to sit for a number of years behind someone who looked a lot like Brock Purdy.
Yeah, and I know you have ranted about Kyle Shanahan before, and we know that he is probably very enamored of his own offense, and maybe he prefers a guy like Brock Purdy, who's just that on-field proxy to run his offense by the book. And Trey Lance is not that sort of guy. Trey Lance is a guy who probably does his best work off script, and that's not really what Kyle Shanahan wants.
Kyle Shanahan holds his plays as precious and his own judgment as precious, and his ego. right? And Purdy fulfills all of those things, right? Purdy protects all of those things. So, of course, it's Purdy's job into perpetuity because it boosts Kyle Shanahan's prestige that he found a guy that was Mr. Irrelevant and he turned the offense over to him and they're going to Super Bowls. And, of course, Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of the credit for this. Some of it deserved, but not all of it. And who gets lost in that shuffle, who gets lost in that narrative? It's Trey Lance. Give us a bold prediction for this year.
Kenneth Walker III finishes as a top 4 running back in 2025 and is a consensus first round, or excuse me, in 2024, he's going to be a top 4 running back and a consensus first round pick in 2025 drafts.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.